Now available in paperback and e-readers, Spinsterella. Discover the dark side of love in this goth and lovely romance with Spinsterella. Get Spinsterella in paperback and e-readers at your favorite online bookseller today. I was watching a Black Male Advice TV, aka Ringo TV Raw live stream on early Sunday morning about 1 a.m., and he was talking about Brian McKnight's sons and their allegations that Brian McKnight has abandoned them. And as I was watching the live stream, I began to see another textbook example of the beta male behavior I talk about in depth in my book, The Man Crisis. And it's clear to me that Brian McKnight's sons are two men in crisis because they were not raised to be men. And it's clear to me that these two males, in their time growing up, did not get any male life skills, and that sadly, Brian McKnight gave them everything except the two things that would have helped them to become men: male life skills and male survival skills, the two things that a man needs in order to go out here and stand on their own 2 feet. Now, your Brian McKnight, from what I've seen, is divorced from these two boys' mother, and as a result of the divorce, he had to pay child support for these two young boys. And Brian McKnight was never remiss as related to paying his child support. However, what happened to these two young boys to put them in crisis is that they became victims of the divorce crisis. And when boys become victims of the divorce crisis, which is a chapter I talk about in The Man Crisis, the divorce crisis, they wind up becoming these messed up boys because instead of them being with their father and taught male life skills, what happens is they get under the mother, and then the mother teaches them a whole host of dysfunction. And then, because the father is not in the environment, the father then coddles the boy by giving him whatever he wants. And when it comes down to boys, this is a major mistake a lot of people who are divorced make, is going to overcompensate by giving boys all the material possessions that they want. However, what boys need is for a man to sit down and teach him these important male life skills and survival skills, because if that boy is not taught those male life skills and survival skills, then he is no earthly good as a man whatsoever. And in the case of Brian McKnight's two sons, it's clear that they are no earthly good to anyone, because at 30 and 27, these men are sitting here crying about being abandoned by Brian McKnight, when it's clear that these boys should have been out on their own by the time they were either 18 years old or by the time they were 21 years old, because in that time they could have at least finished high school or finished college and started laying out plans for what they wanted to do with their life. However, these boys were sitting there at 27 and 30, and they have been on their father's dole for over 13 years. And what's worse is these boys have no sense of shame as related to being taken care of by their father at 30 and 27. And when I look at that, that's really embarrassing for these grown men to sit there and not have one iota of shame to say, look, I'm not taking care of myself, and that there's something wrong with this. However, a lot of these beta males, because they are enabled by guys like Brian McKnight and raised with a dysfunctional frame of thinking by their mothers who give them this idea of entitlement, these boys feel entitled to be able to just live off of their father and have no sense of responsibility as a man. Now, when I look at these guys, again, at 30 and 27, again, these guys shouldn't be out here with their own jobs, paying their own bills, and taking care of their own business as men. But because your Brian McKnight coddled these boys have a sense of entitlement and they believe they are owed support. Now, one of these boys had 3 brand new cars, and I haven't seen any guy out here who, in my age, ever had 1 brand new car until they got into their late 20s or early 30s after they saved up all their money. But this boy is alleging that he was abandoned even though his father bought him 3 brand new cars, allowed him and his brother to sit up in an apartment for 2 years, something most men were not able to do in the 1980s or the 1990s, because once you were out here, you had to find your own way, and you had to find a way to make a living the best way you could. But these guys had brand new cars, probably a fully furnished apartment, and these boys did not do anything with the tools and resources given to them except sit there in the house, from what I'm hearing, and smoke weed every day. Because once Brian McKnight decided to get involved with another woman, that's when we started to see the real B word come out of these boys, and them starting to participate in much of the passive-aggressive beta male behavior I talk about in depth in my book, The Man Crisis, because when these beta males can't get their way, that's when they start participating in passive-aggressive behavior. And when it comes down to the beta male, when they see another woman coming into the territory that their mother is in, what these guys will do is they will start making efforts to protect the mother and try to protect what the mother stands for, because they are feeling emotionally about the mother and not thinking objectively about the whole thing as related to the divorce. So these guys, because they were in their feelings because their father decided to find another woman who was, it looks like she's Hawaiian or Polynesian, and he's decided to move on with that woman, they got really angry about that, even though they were best men at his new wedding, and they started participating in passive-aggressive behavior because the new woman, what she wanted to do was keep that family intact and was trying to protect that family. But these boys, because they were probably listening to that angry mother who wanted to sabotage this relationship, what they wanted to do was say that anything that their father gave them as related to responsibility, they didn't want anything to do with. Now, the new woman, she saw that these boys were sitting in a house doing nothing all day long, and she saw that there was something clearly wrong with that. And she offered to try to get them a job at the hospital where she was working, in these jobs that paid $18 an hour, and offered them an opportunity to go to school. And these boys, because they thought they were going to be sitting there playing the celebrity lifestyle, these boys didn't want to get themselves together, and instead of them trying to get themselves together, they started to participate in the passive-aggressive behavior when Brian McKnight was trying to get them together and sitting there talking about how they wanted to smoke weed. And smoke weed when you're not paying for anything, you don't know how to pay for anything, you don't know how to take care of yourself, and he's trying to get you ready so you can pass a drug test so you can go to this hospital, get this job, and finally find a way to pay your own bills. But instead, what these boys do is throw a middle finger up at their father and continue to smoke weed, showing absolute disrespect for that father. And when I looked at that behavior, it showed me that these boys had no interest in taking any sort of responsibility, and it would be at that point where I would have cut them off right there, because a 30-year-old man and a 27-year-old man, they should be, again, 13 years ago, should have been out of their house and out here taking care of their own business with their own job and being able to pay their own bills and having their own place. But sadly, this is what happens when you have men like Brian McKnight who coddle young boys and do not make them take responsibility for themselves, because a lot of times in divorces, the fathers overcompensate by giving the boy whatever he wants and giving him things because he cannot spend time with him. And what happens is, because you're giving him stuff, he gets this enabled mindset, and he doesn't have any incentive to go out and learn how to do for self. And this is why fathers are important in teaching, because teaching is far more valuable than anything else out here. Because when you teach and prepare a boy, you are giving him those male life skills that will enable him to be able to go out and do for himself, and you'll be able to enable him to go out here and develop something called a work ethic. And sadly, these boys didn't have a work ethic, and once your Brian McKnight saw that they didn't want to work, that's when we saw their behavior escalate, and it looks like there might be possible violence in the future, because he had one of these sons dare to say to his father that he would be better off dead. And that's a red flag for me, because when you have a grown man sitting there talking about how his father would be better off dead, those are indicators to me that these boys might possibly plan some sort of murder of Brian McKnight, because they are upset that he cut them off and is making them take responsibility. Because when beta males can't get their way and they can't get somebody to do things for them, the things that they do is, first, they participate in passive-aggressive behaviors, like when Brian McKnight's new wife offered them a job in smoking this weed, and they did that because passively they wanted to be able to continue doing things, but aggressively they wanted to take a jab at this woman for offering them a job. And then you have them sitting there going out of their way talking about maybe their father would be better off dead. Another statement which shows me that they're getting ready to escalate their behavior to violence, because the beta male, again, when he can't get his way, he acts out in a spectrum of violent behaviors, and this is a clear escalation of that spectrum of violent behaviors. And if I were Brian McKnight, I would be looking over my shoulder, because when you have a son who makes that type of statement cannot be taken lightly, because it clearly shows how out of control this young boy actually is, and he's not understanding about the responsibilities of a man. Now, as a man myself who has been struggling, I would never think to disrespect my father in the way that these men have gone out of their way to disrespect their father. I mean, their father, what he's doing right now, this is just tough love. And what Brian McKnight is trying to do is prepare these boys to be responsible men. Unfortunately, these boys don't want to be responsible men. At 30 and 27, again, these men should have been out of their father's house and out on their own a long time ago. But because of the divorce crisis we have here in America, these boys were coddled and spoiled for far too long. And now, again, they just do not know how to function, and they do not know how to cope. And what I found to be quite troubling was that after being put out of Brian McKnight's life, these boys broke back into his house and then decided to go and take pictures of Brian McKnight's wedding to his new woman, Leilani, and then desecrate those photos and then put a photo in of the mother. And that, again, is not only a disrespect, but it also just shows, again, the violent and sociopathic behavior of the beta male, because this was designed to say that the mother is the only woman they acknowledge and the only woman they will respect, and that they don't respect him as a male authority figure, because they broke into his home, put X's on these photos. And again, this is an escalation of behavior that shows me that these males may possibly be capable of participating in some sort of violence. Now, as a grown man who is 45 years old, I would never think to disrespect my father in the way that these boys have disrespected Brian McKnight. And when I was trying to get my life together and I had the job at AmeriCorps Vista, the first thing I wanted to do was take my father out for Father's Day, and I was able to do that back in 2000. And when I thought my life was getting in order, I wanted to show him that respect by going to go take him out on Father's Day in 2000. Now, I had my struggles over the last couple of years, but in 2008, and I got another job, that first thing I did was show my father respect by going out here and taking him out for Father's Day. And it was that day in 2008 that I saw what my father had done for me. I saw all the work that he had done for me over the years, and I began to appreciate everything that my father did for me. And I would never, again, think to disrespect that man because he had did so much for me. So when I look at these guys and I just see their behavior, again, it's quite troubling to me because, again, when I look at my father and what he did for me and trying to prepare me and trying to help me out, because even when I was unemployed, he would try to help me by giving me money sometimes to go look for work, and he would see me going out and trying to look for work, and he would try to give me advice and things. I would try to show him respect by going out here and making the best effort possible. And before he passed away, one of the things I wanted to do for my father was be out here working, but sadly I wasn't able to because everywhere I went, I ran into resistance in the job market from many of these people in these human resources departments. But one of the things that motivated me to keep pushing was I wanted to show my father his respect by going out here and getting that job so I could go out here and show him that I could be a man just like him and a man just like my brother. And that's what I want to still do to this day. I want to honor my father's memory by going out here and making that living and event. Maybe if I can't do it in the job market because these HR people keep throwing up this brick wall, trying to do it through something like the SJS Direct Imprint and trying to do it through things like YouTube, trying to find a way to show that I can work just like my father. And again, I wanted to do that because I had great respect for my father. I wanted to go out here and prove that I could be a man just like him, that I could carry my own weight just like him, and I could go out here and build just like he did. Those are the things I want to do as a man, and those are the things I wanted to do as a man ever since I graduated high school back in 1992. And even though I have had setbacks in my life, I still persevere towards becoming a working man with a strong work ethic, a strong sense of discipline, because those are the things that my father and my brother instilled in me. And sadly, your Brian McKnight's sons at 30 and 27, these boys, they didn't get these skills instilled in them. And because they did not get those skills instilled in them, they didn't become men. They became males. And these males have the audacity to sit up here and disrespect the honor and memory of their father and the legacy of their father by saying that he abandoned them when he did not abandon them. There comes a point in a boy's life where he has to step up to the role of manhood, and he has to step up to the responsibilities of manhood, and he has to be ready to get on that road to manhood. But sadly, when I look at Brian McKnight's sons, they are not ready for the role of manhood. They are not eager to take on the responsibility of manhood, and instead what they do is dishonor their father by saying he abandoned them when he did not abandon them. There comes a point in every man's life where he has to cut the apron strings and step out on his own. He has to walk away from his mother and his father, and he has to step out and be his own man. That's what every man used to believe. Unfortunately, due to the coddling culture that has been created under feminism, we have created this whole 2 to 3 generations of soft males, and these soft males don't believe that it is their job to be responsible because these guys think just like a woman. And because they think just like a woman, you have guys like Brian McKnight's sons who are 30 and 27 believing that they are entitled to their father's resources when the father should have cut them off from resources long ago. Now, your Brian McKnight is a very compassionate man. To sit there and tolerate this mess from these boys for so long, because I would have cut those boys off again once they turned 18 or 21, and if they didn't want to get a job or go to the military or go to college, then we have nothing to talk about whatsoever, because until you deal with, the only way boys learn responsibility is to make them take responsibility. And again, unfortunately, women and men who are divorced don't know how to make boys take responsibility. And that's how you get spoiled, coddled, spoiled, rotten boys like Brian McKnight's male sons, who again show that they don't have any salt of the earth, they have no seasoning, and that these are the type of males who would get trampled on the ground because these males don't know the basics about being men and don't want to even stand up and be men, because to be offered a job by the Brian McKnight's new wife that will allow you to get on your feet, that's something that I wish I had right now, because as a guy who has been struggling for the last decade to find a new job, I would appreciate that type of offer if it were given to me. And I appreciated it back about in 2008 when my family member offered that to me, when he offered me the lead on the civil service test in 2007. I was grateful for that opportunity, and I was grateful for the family member who gave me $60 a month just to stay alive during that time, and I had to scrape to get that type of money together to take that civil service test. And again, this was opportunity. When I had it, I took great appreciation of it. But your Brian McKnight's sons, they don't appreciate what's given to them. They think because they are Brian McKnight's sons, they have a right to just live the high life. But the high life is not guaranteed to anyone. You have to go out here and work for anything that you want. You have to go out here and grind. You have to go out here and hustle. And it's a hard, painful road, but it's something every man has to do out here. He has to go out here, and if he wants something, he has to go out here and go through pain. And that was one of the things I learned working at the Strive East Harlem Employment Service back in 2000. He's got to go through pain, he's got to go through hardship, and he's got to struggle. And it's in that struggle that that man builds the discipline, character, and resolve. And he also grows to appreciate all the things that he works for. And it's clear to me that Brian McKnight's sons never learned to appreciate anything. And that's the reason why they're so ungrateful today. And they are, as grateful as they are, showing us all a textbook example of the spoiled, rotten beta males that come up during the man crisis. And they show us how deeply dysfunctional these males are due to the way they have been raised, either by these single mothers or by these fathers who enable and coddle and spoil them. And they show us, again, a man who does not have the salt of the earth to be seasoned and strong. No, they show us the type of male who will be trampled on the earth and a complete disgrace and a dishonor to their fathers. And the type of male who would be a shame to the father and a shame to deal with, because this type of male, to sit there and desecrate his father's photos and disrespect him, and then to talk about how his father would be better off dead, this right here shows me a man who really just is really sick and twisted. And again, if I were Brian McKnight, I would be looking into getting a restraining order against these boys, because for him to sit there and talk about his father in that way, that right there is grounds for me to say, I need to watch my back. I need to go get me a restraining order, because if he's going to sit there and talk about how he may possibly see me as better off dead, that's not only a boy in crisis, that's a boy getting ready to participate in a spectrum of violent behaviors. And Brian McKnight needs to take it far more seriously than it is, because yes, these boys are of you, but it's clear to me that they don't care about you. They're so caught up in the rhetoric that their mother has told them that they don't know how to go out here and be the man that you're asking them to, and they don't want to take that responsibility. So they think that if they can hurt you to get their inheritance, I would, again, cut these guys off, because they are clearly, by making an emotional statement like that, showing plans for some sort of violence. And as I've seen with these beta males, when they make a statement like that, you just can't take it lightly, because this type of male, when he's out here, he's going to participate in that behavior. And as I see it, when these Brian McKnight's sons, these are just some deeply troubled males. And again, they don't want to be men. They don't want to take the responsibility of men. They don't want to be in the leadership role of a man. What they want to do is be under a woman. And that's probably where they'll wind up if they get disowned, because that's what happens with these beta males. If they can't go out on their own, they go have a codependent relationship with a woman. And again, when I look at this case, I see another textbook example of the dysfunctional beta male behavior I talk about in the man crisis. And it's clear to me that Brian McKnight's boys are men in crisis. If you want to learn more about the dysfunctional behavior that beta males participate in, like Brian McKnight's sons, you can pick up my book, The Man Crisis, in paperback and Kindle formats. You can also find it in ebook formats on Smashwords, the iBookstore, and Google Play. And if you want to help me make more videos like this, you can donate to my PayPal, my Patreon, or my Cash App by clicking the link in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, subscribe. Now available for the first time on Google Play, The Man Crisis. Learn why so many men are falling apart in an increasingly gynocentric world in The Man Crisis. Get your copy on Google Play today.